All right, this is a Pro Wrestling Illustrated podcast. I'm your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle, joined as always by my co-host Brian Solomon. How's it going?
Going well, Al. Happy to be here as always.
Thank you. Yeah, and in a bit, I expect we're going to be joined by the boss, Kevin Mel, as we speak. Here we go. So,
Right on time.
Speak of the devil, Kevin. We just began.
Oh, we're recording.
We're recording. We're live.
Pal.
We're live, pal.
Hey, can I do that over?
Yeah, literally seconds in, we figured you might be a while, so we were going to start talking Rumble, all that. But happy you could be with us. And Kevin, editor-in-chief of PWI, is with us because there is a lot to talk about. Big news both in the pro wrestling world and in the pages of PWI with our annual achievement awards. We're going to be going through most or all of them. I guess depends on timing. And also talking the Rumble. Why don't we cut to the chase? Again, I want to leave time to talk about the awards, so we'll get into a little later. Breaking news is everything coming out of the Rumble and now the Raw after the Rumble. Not only is the Rumble one of the biggest shows of the year, but it sets up the biggest show of the year, WrestleMania, which is now kind of starting to come into focus. So a lot to talk about there. Let's start with the men's Rumble. Jey Uso wins. I mean, something of an upset, but also I don't think completely an upset. I mean, he was definitely in the mix for me. I mean, I would have had him in my top 4 possibilities. And I think so much of the Rumble speaks to something we talk about here a lot, and that's that WWE's in really good shape now. I mean, it's almost an embarrassment of riches. The stars they have who are, could legitimately headline a WrestleMania. And kind of the other part of that is you don't really need to headline a WrestleMania by winning the Rumble, and that is the upside of having 2 world championships, one a heel, one a babyface, one absolutely a WrestleMania a headliner in Cody Rhodes, and the other one maybe not so much. And what I mean by that is that a Jey Uso could win it, and I don't expect Jey Uso to close out either night of WrestleMania. Last few years, a lot of WrestleManias have opened with a world title match. I could, certainly see this in that spot opening night 1 or night 2 against Gunther. But, a star is born, and I don't know if he was born this night, but I think this has been the trajectory, and it's been apparent for a while now that Jey is one of the hottest acts in all of wrestling. I think the top merchandise seller in WWE. Brian, I'll ask you, I mean, do you have any sense whether, I feel like maybe this wasn't the plan even 3 weeks ago, that they might have called something of an audible, seeing how hot Jey was? Because I don't know if the plan is Gunther and Jey, I don't know that you would have done that on Saturday night's main event with a week or 2 build-up a couple of weeks ago. But I think there was this realization on the way that, like, look, we've got, a CM Punk and Cody Rhodes, these super over arena filling baby faces, and we might have another one here on our hands. So, let's go all in with him.
Yeah, first of all, I'm going to advocate right here and right now, Jey Uso on the cover sooner rather than later. It needs to happen. I'm just putting that out there. And yeah, I mean, this was, you're saying it wasn't totally unexpected. I have to say, I did not see this coming. This is one of the most unpredictable winners that I could think of, at least since they started doing, the winner gets a title shot thing. Before that, it could be like, oh, Hacksaw Jim Duggan or, Big John Studd. But there was even one point towards the end where I took a note of this because I was talking about it with the people I was watching it with. There were 7 people left at a certain point. And we said, it definitely not Jey Uso. Like, out of these 7 guys, it was like, Punk, McIntyre, I forget who, Logan Paul, there were 7 guys in there. And I said, I could see any of these 6 except Jey Uso. I don't see it because I still saw him as, and this is a good thing, upper mid card, the way he's positioned on cards. But I think it's good to do something like this. I've said it for years. This is what the Rumble should be for, at least part of the time, to take somebody who's not quite there yet and get them there instead of just, yay, it's Randy Orton, yay, it's CM Punk, yay, it's Cody Rhodes. Like, sometimes I think that the main event world title thing, it paints them into a corner, right? Where they want to be like, well, every man for himself, anyone could win. Yeah, but not really, because we're not putting, Santos Escobar in the main event of WrestleMania. So I think this shakes it up. It's the way to go, because he's somebody who maybe he wasn't like cemented main event, but he's also not somebody who's just languishing. He's somebody who's really over. He's already getting a big push. I think it was a great choice. I find it hilarious and just frustratingly hilarious when you see things online, and I posted it. There was something on one of the news aggregator sites where it was like overwhelmingly negative reaction to the Royal Rumble winner. And I'm like, are we living on the same planet? Like, how, this is why politics doesn't surprise me, right? Because I think the same thing about that. You watch Monday Night Raw and you go like, what are you talking about? Like, maybe, yeah, there's a vocal reaction that's negative online. You could find a vocal reaction to almost anything online. It doesn't reflect the reality of what's happening in WWE right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, Jey is incredibly over. I think he might be the most over guy in all of wrestling right now, including guys like Punk and Cody and Roman, who are super over.
Which is crazy, but it's possible, yes.
Yeah. That said, Kevin, I want to ask about sort of how real the Jey Uso thing is, because I've drawn a couple of parallels. One is Joe Hendry, right, who was also in the Rumble. And I think what they did right that TNA did wrong is they're striking while the iron is hot. And I think TNA waited a little too long. The guy's still super over, but I think they would have gotten more out of it had they, pulled the trigger on him back in Slammiversary or Bound for Glory. The flip side of that is this also reminds me a little bit of Kofi Mania, which was sort of like a little, a bit of a mirage, right? I mean, like,
Sure.
I don't know how real it was. It made fans feel good. And, but at the end of the day, it's like, is this guy going to carry our company? Is this guy going to be slaying all the giants? That doesn't mean don't go all in. I think you should, but I think also maybe expectations need to be tempered a little. So Kevin, and you're muted. So before you start talking,
yeah. I was just trying to make sure not to.
Kevin's a pro.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think with Jey Uso specifically, I mean, it's hard to resist some of these comparisons that you're talking about, and I don't think they're completely undeserved. But something like Kofi Mania, you also have to look. A lot of this is in the follow through.
Yeah.
Kofi Mania. I wrote this piece a while back for our Substack page with the Weekly about how a lot of that was, well, okay, you tell people that this guy's going to lose or can only wrestle mid-card guys, then that's what they believe. It's, at a point, perception is reality and vice versa. And I think with Jey, it's going to depend on this follow through. And I think this was a huge thing. I didn't foresee it happening. I always go back to the Kayfabe News article, Colin Hunter, friend of the show. It was something like, any man can win the Royal Rumble except for these 26 guys. This year it felt actually like there were more potential winners, and they, to their credit, that building it up. Even I don't think anyone really thought Sami Zayn was going to win, but there was a conversation about how he could win. Maybe Kevin Owens helps him. Maybe he came in. There was this promo he had on Raw a week ago, I think, where he said something like being one of the top 7 or 8 guys, like the guys in the company, and then like I think it was 7 other guys in the ring, and Sammy's music hits. Like, it's very, very intentional how they do a lot of this stuff, and I think that's great. But to get back to Jey specifically, you call him main event Jey Uso, you have to have him win a main event. He can't just be challenging Roman and that's when he's the main event and that's it. Or like he has a one-off against Gunther. I think they really do have to pay this off. It was a pleasant surprise to see somebody win the Rumble who was not like super positioned to win the Rumble, but who also was credible in that role. So I think, we'll see what happens in the next few months, but certainly take advantage of that time with him now. And I mean, if it's good for a couple months and that's it, then that's enough. That not everybody has to be champion for a year and a half. I don't think that's necessary.
Yeah. I also noticed, Al, because you mentioned, and I was thinking this way too, but now I'm not sure. You said, well, it doesn't have to be the literal main event, right? The world title doesn't always go on last, so there's no guarantee he'll actually be on last. Even I think if they were going to be, it would be night one, I would imagine. But I remember thinking that, but now I'm not 100% sure, because especially he said something last night, and again, he keeps hammering it home like I'm in the main event, and I feel like they wouldn't have him say that. I could be wrong. They've let people down before.
We know there's like 7 main events. They all count.
Yeah, you're right. But I'm thinking, would they specifically have him keep saying that and get the expectations up and then have him come out for match one? I mean, yeah, it's possible, but I'm not totally sure.
Another thing you got to think about in terms of sort of strategy is the entrance, right? And the energy of Jay's entrance. And I think you want that crowd at an absolute fever pitch when he comes into the ring, which is an argument for opening night one with Jey Uso and Gunther, when everybody's really jacked up and on their feet, and 60,000 fans, so the hands are going up and down the air. I think it's a great way to open WrestleMania. I think it'll get everybody in the mood. So I think that's probably the plan, but I also think they're going to play by ear and see where he is in 2 months. And I don't doubt that in 2 months, is it even? Yeah, it's around 2 months, right? They say, no, this guy is the biggest thing in the company. Maybe they decide to close night 2 with him, if he is that over. So I want to dig deeper into like what it is about Jey Uso, right? And because I was watching his promo last night on Raw, and by sort of like usual pro wrestling standards, it's kind of a mess, but it was also so likable. And
it was a good mess.
Yes. And it sort of reminds me of like Sting back in the day, where he'd be all over the place, but there was something endearing about it, because I think what comes through is authenticity, right? Like this is that guy. This is a real guy. And especially since they turned him babyface and he went on his own. I think we've kind of gotten, not to get too corny, sort of a look into the soul of Jey Uso and the person that he is. And he's very easy to like and to get behind. I had some people over for it, and they also made the point that it probably doesn't hurt that his brother, it's got a reputation for being a little bit of a screw up, right? So in contrast, it's like he looks like the star student. But Brian, what's your take? What is the Jey Uso appeal?
Well, there's realness there. I said it on Twitter last night, and I didn't mean it as an insult to any wrestlers, but these guys are not, no one's ever going to call them the greatest actors in the world, right? I mean, we know that. So you can tell when emotion is real. And I'm sorry, if Jey Uso, if that was him pretending last night, then he needs to get an Academy Award. He needs to get a nomination. That felt like a very real, natural response that he channeled into, his promo. And people appreciate that. Like, you saw the place get so excited, and they gave him a round of applause for crying. You know what I mean? Because it was almost like this is a real guy. And I think that's part of it. And yeah, people can say, oh, it's Yeet and it's this. And I'm like, yeah, so like that's part of the assignment. Like, you have to figure out a way to get over, and you do it. And I'm not saying you can't have any, that's all it takes. But, and yeah, people have pointed out that everybody likes to talk about the Uso versus Uso match, which was a train wreck at Mania, right? In some situations, he hasn't delivered in a big match. I feel like that's the kind of thing you work with. You work with him on that. You don't just say, oh yeah, you can't be a top guy because, your matches are not quite where we want them to be. I think that's sabotaging thinking from the company standpoint. You wake up and you go, oh my God, look at this guy. We've got to work with him. An extreme case. I'm not saying Jey Uso is Goldberg, but Goldberg's an extreme case where they were like, this guy's terrible. He doesn't know how to do anything, but holy cow, they love him. Let's try to figure this out. Jey Uso is not in that category. Like, he's a dependable guy in the ring. He's a decent worker, and I think it's all that stuff. It's like he figured out how to get over. He's got a natural it factor. He's got, and this was a guy who is a stupendous worker in the ring, but what Bryan Danielson was able to do, and Daniel Bryan, it's like he got to that point. As good as he is in the ring, I don't think that's what got him to that point. There's a million guys that are maybe not as great as him, but that are very, very good in the ring, and they can't get over like that. And with him, it was all that other stuff that he figured out on top of it, you know? So I think it's sort of like this natural thing that they allowed to grow and develop, and now they have something, you know? They'd be stupid not to do something with it.
And it really is like this sense of authenticity. I think you guys are hitting on that correctly. It's, I mean, even just, and obviously he wasn't really actually surprised to win the Royal Rumble, but there was a part of him that still couldn't believe it.
Right.
I don't know if you saw in the ring. Do we swear on the show? Not normally, but I'm gonna. You see him in the ring after he shoves Cena off the apron. He mouths, "Holy shit!" And then just everybody, you know, like that was believable. Like, of course he knew he was winning the match.
Yeah, that's what I said at home watching it too.
Yeah, right. But even he was like, in that moment, was like, I can't believe it. It actually happened. You know, so that's, and I think he's latched onto something. And I think this is what's working for the people who have gotten over big as baby faces the last few years. Him, Cody Rhodes, Sami Zayn, prime examples, is that they are not afraid to be vulnerable, not afraid to kind of let their emotions show. And I think that was missing for a long time in wrestling. I mean, it's always been there, but as Brian said, very few people are actually able to tap into it or choose to tap into it. And so I think he's part of that same trajectory as, Cody Rhodes or something like that. And I mean, I think he's, you know, not as hard on the sleeve as Cody, but, you know, we saw him go through all the wars he went through with Roman and how beaten down he was and how hard that was on him physically and emotionally. And that's part of what made those storylines so resonant, you know?
Yeah. And I think, you know, it's as much as it seems like Jey, it's sort of the overnight sensation that he's really caught, you know, fire in the last few months with fans. You did see traces of this, you know, 4 years ago when they began the storyline, the Bloodline storyline. And remember, really, the first chapter of the Bloodline storyline was Jey and Roman in those empty arenas, and those were fantastic. I mean, that was some of the best storytelling in the entire Bloodline storyline, and it was Jey, and that's where you saw a Jey show that emotion cast differently, kind of like this heel stuck between, you know, loyalty to his family and himself and his brother, and you know, the way that character morphed, where he was sort of the enforcer who had no time for Sami Zayn for all those months when they were trying to get him into the Bloodline. So there is kind of a long story arc that brought us the Jey Uso that we have now. Do we assume it's Gunther? Is there a chance that it's Cody? Is there something else that could be in the mix?
Well, he apparently said at the press conference, and I've not gone back and watched it yet. That was a very long night. But he said something to the effect of, you know, it's Gunther he wants. But I guess technically, like, the match hasn't been declared yet. And
last night he said, "Well, I'm going to go holler."
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And actually, I've not caught up on Raw last night, so I did not have time this morning. So
yeah, he said he was going, but I think that's one of those things is to keep interest going. Just like I think Charlotte Flair said. She's going to NXT. Why in the world she would want to go after the NXT title, I have no idea. At her level, she's going to, you know, Raw, SmackDown. It just, I think, sort of drags it out a little bit. I don't know if it's completely out of the question, because it sometimes feels like they're much more like Triple H is much more open to going with the flow than Vince was. And if he feels like Cody, then maybe it would be Cody. I would not do that. I've said it many, many times on here, and I still believe it. Cody is that kind of a baby face who is we saw it in AEW. I still believe this, very vulnerable to having fans turn on him if the circumstances aren't right. And that includes putting him against the wrong person. And it's that classic old school booking mentality. Like, if you put those two guys against each other, they're going to turn on one of those guys. And I think at this particular moment, that would be Cody, unfortunately. So I don't know if you want to do that. And that would be, unless they're going with the Cody heel turn, which we can talk about, Al. There were like,
you're turning everybody heel.
There were hints of that with the Kevin Owens thing, the kind of, you know, posing over his fallen body and everything. Although then having Kevin attack Sammy the next day, you know, maybe that's not the direction they're going in. But it kind of felt like, wow, that's kind of of a heelish thing for Cody to do, like to really gloat over him like that. Deserved though it may be, it still feels like a heelish thing to do.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it, and I want to get to Charlotte in a moment, but let's talk about kind of the picture that is emerging at WrestleMania. And here's what it looks like to me. Correct me if you see something differently. You've got Jey and Gunther rematch of Saturday night's main event. They started telling that story last night. It's sort of the David and Goliath thing. You've got Cody and Cena ostensibly winning the Elimination Chamber, challenging Cody. It looks like maybe a triple threat, Roman, Punk, and Seth. And I could see that closing night one.
I could.
In that there's the star power and Punk gets his WrestleMania main event, if only on paper. Kevin and Sammy, which is incredible that we're going back to that well, but it certainly looks like that's the plan. Charlotte and Rhea, I guess, and I'm not really sure what they'd be doing with the other women's match.
I think it's going to be Charlotte and Tiffany. That's
really,
I had seen that in certain. Yeah.
I think it's going to be the rubber match of. I mean, I think they're trying to tell the story that this is like one of the great WrestleMania feuds. Charlotte and Rhea now do it for the third time. But that looks like it. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about Charlotte now? And it's funny because it feels like for everything we just said about Jey and that authenticity and the connecting with fans, it's sort of 180 degrees for Charlotte. I mean, last night was pretty remarkable. And you talk about, I think it shook her up. I don't know if you saw Kevin, but she basically got booed out of the building, and I don't think she was ready for that. And it is her first promo back on wrestling in whatever it is, a year and a half. And this is not the first time that's happened. I mean, it feels like this has become a thing that Charlotte takes a long time away, comes back, with a lot of pomp and circumstance, and the fans reject her. And it's this weird thing where on one hand, I think there's an appreciation that she's great, that she's elite, that she is one of the best wrestlers in the world, and in some ways deserving of her spot. And yet also, I don't know if it's like the Nepo baby thing or it's just overstayed your welcome. I don't know what it is. What do you think?
There's a sense that it always has to be, that Charlotte always has to have a go when she's ready to have a go. And I think this is the same thing that we had with Roman before he went rogue, Cena for many years.
Yep. Just
kind of like, well, this person exists and they've been a champion many times. So it makes sense that they're in the title picture every time they come back from. And again, she's taken a lot of time away, and a lot of it, I mean, injuries. It's very rare she was just taking time off for herself. But, it's happened a few times, and she immediately goes into the title picture. And I think especially with the WWE women's divisions, I think there's this sense among fans that like they want to see more people and new people get a turn. Everybody has their favorites. They're very devoted to them. And there's this perception, at least, that Charlotte is being sort of shoehorned in. And again, it's not that she can't compete at that level. Her match with Rhea from 2 years ago, match of the year, voted by PWI readers. So certainly it would be great, but I think there is also a sense of been there, done that to some degree. And I'm not entirely surprised that she was booed the way she was booed. And it's just, it's a shame if that's not what they're going for, but I mean, I think you got to lean into it now.
How do you do that? And that's
have her go heel. I mean, so I mean,
she's done that too, and they reject. I mean, that's the difference between her and like the Roman rejection is that they were able to address the Roman thing by a tweak of the character, and I feel like every version of Charlotte we've gotten, the fans just reject.
Right, but if you lean into that, say the Nepo baby angle or something, and I mean, there's a fine line because they're to go away heat at a point, but I think I don't know. I think it was a mistake to have her win that match. I think, given that we got Jey, I'm not surprised that they didn't also go with Roxanne. And going in, I would not have said Roxanne.
Yeah.
But you're in that situation where you have little Roxanne and you have Charlotte, who's like tall and powerful, and then you have Nia, who's just a powerhouse. The story there, especially because Roxanne, a lot of the match, she wasn't really working like a heel. She was really just kind of being like, okay, I'm going to fight and try and win this. And she had her moments where she was more like oblivious or arrogant or whatever. But I think, you could have pulled the trigger on her and you would have had someone who was just made right then. And she's ready for the call up. She's ready to be on the main roster. Especially with her no longer being champion. I mean, you would think, why would they dangle that carrot and then not do it? But, Charlotte's kind of a safe choice. And on the other hand, you kind of see why they go back to her. It's just, I don't know. To me, it was a very, the match itself was very good. And I think going back to the well with Charlotte feels like too many times for, it's WrestleMania's got to have her in the main event every year. And it's a little tired.
Yeah, you're right. And yeah, there's definitely kind of a tone deafness of the booking of that Rumble. And they kind of couldn't have done it worse. I mean, they have Charlotte come in late, right? Which I think already breeds a little bit of resentment that you have, these women like Roxanne and others that have been working so hard. She comes in, whatever she was, 27, has a 10-minute entrance with fireworks and all this stuff. And the fans just didn't want to see it. They just
and 27 everyone knows is like the lucky number or whatever. And it's not the winningest number anymore, which is it's 30 now, but just people like you've trained fans that like whoever gets that 27 spot is in position to win the Rumble, and they're the luckiest of them all. And she won the genetic lottery because she's an incredible athlete and she's second generation world champion many times over. So I mean, it's kind of like tone deaf is the right word, Al, because it really seems like you have, like if you wanted to have her get booed out of the building, you would have done it exactly like this.
Yeah, right. Which, if the idea is to get Rhea really hot and have a lot of fans behind her, maybe this helps, right? I mean, she's going to have the crowd firmly behind her at WrestleMania. But Brian, what do you do with Charlotte going forward? How do you salvage this?
Well, it came off as a very safe choice, I thought, like we've said. And the Rumble itself, I thought, one of the better women's Rumbles. In fact, maybe the best I can remember. It was very well planned out and just laid out. I often find that's not the case with the women's Rumble, and I sometimes wonder if it's just because they give more attention to the men's Rumble and planning it out, and with the agents and everything else, sometimes feels like the women's Rumble is just a mishmash without a narrative. This year, I thought it was very well done. Did not like the ending like a lot of people. I think Charlotte, it's the opposite of Jey Uso. Like, I think Charlotte is very, very good in the ring. I think she's one of the best workers they have, man or woman, period. But for some reason, she hasn't, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's there's a lot of second generation wrestlers and third generation. Cody's one.
Jey Uso is one.
Right, The Rock. I mean, it's more than that. Like, for example, because I was doing this ranking for another project I was doing, but look at the four horsewomen, as they called them, right? If you look at those four women, in terms of not ability, but in terms of like impact, iconic status, whatever kind of ephemeral, however you rank it, I put her fourth out of the four. Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks, Bailey. I put her fourth if I'm ranking them like among the all times, however you want to do it. And it's not, I think, in the ring, she's probably the best of the four of them, but there's just something that it has never been able to quite connect. And I think she's one of those people who has been pushed beyond where she should have been pushed. I think she's, as they say, a great hand. She can get a great match out of anybody. But I think that it's that shoving down the throat of fans that has hurt her more than anything. It's happened with a lot of other people, like we saw. And I don't know what you do. Like, the thing is, Tiffany Stratton is somebody, I don't even know what she is from week to week. She seems to be on the verge of being a babyface. I'm not quite sure. I guess probably if you do this with Charlotte, that's definitely where it goes. And maybe, like you said, that's what they want. Maybe they see this as, this is how we get Tiffany Stratton over the top. She still has that. She's on the fence. We put her with Charlotte. She's going to get over as a major babyface. I don't know. With Rhea, I feel like she's already there. I mean, she's the most over woman in the whole business, probably, and arguably in anyone in the company. I mean, we're talking about Jey, but I mean, she's in that, conversation of the most over talent in WWE. So I don't know. That seems to be a little bit more of a head scratcher of what they would do with that. I mean, unless they're going to plan to have Charlotte win. Sometimes I think it's just because they're trying to have her catch up with her dad. I know that sounds stupid, But I don't know if they want her to beat it, because I think they're looking for Cena to beat it. But it's almost like they're thinking in the back of their mind, one day, maybe after Cena, but one day she's going to beat that 17 and she's going to beat that 16, whatever it is. And she's got to catch up a little bit. It just sounds like a really stupid way to book, but that could be how they're thinking. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's part of also the resentment was that there's kind of something artificial about her title reign. They were giving them to her like, this is like, 2000 era WCW where the world title was changing every week. So she got her 16. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I imagine within the span of 4 years, 5 years, something like that, she probably got most of those 16 titles.
It took Ric Flair 19 years.
Belts, if you recall. It was,
what's that?
Oh, right. Yeah.
She technically got another title reign that way.
Yeah.
Right. But I just want to say it took Ric Flair 19 years. So, the business has changed, I guess, but it means a lot less when they're just handing it out like candy like that, at least to me. But you could say the same thing about Cena, though. I mean, some of his
Cena took 10 probably or more. Maybe 11 years to get all those. So
there's a few in there, but you could say the same with Flair if you really wanted to.
Yeah,
there's a few in there where it was just like, okay, whatever. He had it for a day or whatever.
Yeah, a lot of Flairs, because by 91 he had just reached 7, right? Yeah. And then by 2000, I guess he had packed on another 9. So a lot of them were condensed. So a big picture. What are we thinking about WrestleMania? Now that it's starting to come into focus, I mean, does this feel like the WrestleMania worthy card?
Well, they have so much star power, and one of the things we've talked about is, from a booking standpoint, like you said, it's an embarrassment of riches where you have so many possible ways you can go, so many permutations. I think they like having that. I think that's why they plant all these seeds of things that don't always immediately pay off, whether it's Cody and Punk or whatever. Things that they can have in their back pocket, so they already have a history when they do decide to pull the trigger. So, I mean, I have no doubt that this is going to be, in terms of, the star power, because there have been some years where it was not. This is going to be one of those years where it'll be a pretty stacked card for sure.
And with no Rock, it looks like, and no Goldberg, which were two of the names that I guess were rumored. And even without those two names, it's like an abundance of star power.
Yeah.
Exciting. I thought a really fun Rumble, long, right? I mean, these WWE, well, it wasn't even the length of the show, but it is sort of the format now. And there's so much downtime, right? I mean, there were legit like half hours between matches where nothing was happening, right? I mean, it's just commercial and
very long show for it only being 4 matches. I believe on Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer said that assuming that the one it was Bruno Sammartino and it wasn't Stan Stasiak, but whatever held the record,
Waldo Von Erich.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Waldo Von Erich was supposedly an 84-minute match or whatever, but was almost certainly padded, because that's all the matches were padded by about 10 minutes back then when you had the matches of that length. But apart from that, the Men's Royal Rumble match is the longest match in WWE history. So probably in actuality is the longest.
Which is crazy because in those early years, they were sticklers for the 2 minutes or a lot closer. And they had moved so far away from it that in recent years, guys were coming out every 45 seconds. And
some of them were real quick, but Roman, after he was in the ring, I think it took about 5 minutes till the next person was in. It was, I didn't have a stopwatch going, but it was a while.
Yeah, they're definitely not sticking to the 2 minutes for sure. But I have to challenge Dave on that, because I did a little work on that when I did the Gorilla book, because they had Gorilla and Bruno had the second longest singles match in WWE history, which, like you said, Kevin, they padded and all this stuff. But by all accounts, the real, actual, legitimate time was something like 70 minutes, even though they said it was, an hour and a half or whatever. But when I looked into that, there are actually a few matches that are longer, but they're all multi-person matches. Like, I think the Greatest Royal Rumble, the one they did in Saudi, where they had they had 40, 50 people in there or something. That was longer. There was a match they did on Raw a few years back where it was like a round robin. Remember that one? It took up like almost half the show, where it was a round robin match where new guys kept coming in,
Right.
and that one went insanely long, longer than this even, I think. But what he's talking about, I guess, is the longest singles matches, and that would still be the San Martino Von Erich, followed closely by San Martino Monsoon, and I think nothing else is even really close to that, because I think those are the only two singles matches that have ever gone over an hour in the company's history.
Yeah. Anyway, again, a really fun show. Let's switch over to the other big news, and that is the news in the pages of our magazine, the 2020. Would we call these the 2025 Achievement Awards or the 2024 Achievement Awards? I always
2024. It's Achievement 2024.
Okay.
Cover date is 2025. It comes out in 2025, but all the voting takes place in 2024 for 2024. So,
yes, and let's use this as an opportunity to plug the magazine. PWI hyphen. Do you care if we say hyphen or dash? Stu was a stickler for that.
Hyphen is correct, but if you want to say dash, I'm not gonna. I
think people know.
You get 3 strikes with dash, and then
minus sign.
Al, you're obsessed with this hyphen dash thing. I don't know.
Stu keeps me up at night too. .com, PWI -online.com. Go and get it. Whether I'm surprised how quickly these come now. I mean, the lag between the digital and the print is as short as it's ever been. It's just a couple of days. I'm sometimes surprised how early I have it in my mail.
For subscribers specifically, that's a reason to subscribe to the print edition.
Yeah. Great looking cover. 3 blonde women, all award winners. Blondes have more fun, and
almost had Cody on the cover, by the way. I talk about that in my column. And the original concept pitch, and I spoke with Jason McVeigh. He actually wrote the cover lead for this one. I don't think that's been said publicly, but his and wins was his. But the idea was to have Cody on the cover, and it would be a little tongue in cheek. And I figured I could have pictured Stu doing that in the late 90s, something like that. But the Cody photos were just simply not ready in time. The cover takes longer to get done. It has to be approved earlier than some of the other pieces. So we were able to have Cody's photos with his plaques in the magazine, but not for the cover, sadly.
That was cool. And I have to say, what a cool thing that is. I've said it before, but I'm old enough to remember the days where you would never in a million years imagine seeing a WWE wrestler posing with their plaque. I mean, they just no-sold it for years.
Yeah, it's a new era. It really
great.
is. They're much more open. And you know what else? It was really cool. We on Instagram, Liv Morgan gave a shout out specifically to Tony Morgan, to Tony Storm and Mariah May. And all 3 of them are added as collaborators on the post. So it's WWE and AEW working together in the most.
Look at that. You're opening the forbidden door.
Wow. Worlds collide. I love it.
Yeah.
Could you give us a peek behind the curtain of getting those plaques to them? I mean, I imagine it's a lot of.
Yeah, it's very stressful. So, because what happens is we try and keep the award voting open as long as we possibly can. I end up selecting the date for that several months in advance because the ballot goes in the women's 250 issue. So I have to figure, okay, what's our press lead time going to look like around that time? How long will it give people to vote based on how long that magazine is on newsstands when it gets to other countries, so on and so forth. And then what happens beyond that is the last thing that I'm able to consider, because I don't even know it at the time, is when each company is going to wrap up really and truly for the year, because it seems to shift a little bit every year. And there's some pre-tapes. And that's what ends up happening is, if we want to get so-and-so their plaque, we need to get it to them by this date or else we're not going to have it in time for us to go to press, that sort of thing. Like as an example, we knew we weren't going to get Bianca and Jade their plaques, specifically because Jade's out injured.
Right.
Like for tag team of the year. So we didn't do that. But some of these other ones, it's like, this person is going to be at this taping, or they should be. So let's ship it to the venue, or let's ship it to this person who will then bring it to the venue.
So are these done on different days did different people get their plaques in different days?
Yeah. Yep.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So
one show that they all
they're presented by and large by people at the companies, because it's just, we don't have I mean, we have much better access in terms of this than we did, previously, but we still don't have the send Bill Apter out to give a plaque. And I'm sure Bill would be happy to do that. We could bring him back just for that. But it's a process. I mean, even, and then also something like the Weston Awards. So Dave Meltzer was sent his plaque, and we'll have a photo of him in an upcoming issue with his plaque. He got his photo
in the mess of papers.
Yeah. So we sent right. So we sent it to him, and then I said, "Hey, Dave, are you going to what's the pay-per-view? Battle in the Valley? Because we'll have a photographer there. We'll get a picture." So Issa, who does all of our the majority of our photos for the Spotlight on Japan issue that's coming out, grabbed a picture of Dave Meltzer at the New Japan taping. Like, it's just all over the place. We had, Matt Cardona last year with his plaques. He got picture taken at one of the, I think it was a big event convention. Like, it's just really all over the place, and it is very stressful, and I question why I do it to myself, but the end result looks good. And you can't beat that. You get like
absolutely
different companies, and some of these too, like we'll go into the specific. I won't go into specific.
Yeah, no, it definitely adds something to doing the actual plaques. Throwback, and I think it looks great. I mean, I'm looking at Tony Storm with her award, and it's just a great looking photo.
The very brief period where she was not timeless anymore. Yeah,
that's I didn't even notice that.
And I think when you have somebody like Cody, for example, Wrestler of the Year, he's somebody who I'm sure. I mean, I have a very strong sense has an appreciation for Pro Wrestling Illustrated, for the history of it, for the value of it in the industry. Like, he's got an awareness of wrestling history. I'm sure he knows his father was on the cover of the first issue, things like that. And so it makes it easier to pull off, because he's not somebody that they have to stand there and sell on the idea. Like, why am I doing this? Why am I holding this thing? Right. He's not somebody, I'm sure there have been people like that. He is not like that. So I think that helps. He's not like that, and he's the top guy. So it sort of cascades down, I think.
Yeah. So what do we begin with Cody Rhodes? And I mean, it just talks to the year that he had. And I mean, it is hard to remember anybody having this kind of year. So he wins the Royal Rumble for the second time, beats Roman Reigns in the main event of WrestleMania 40, the biggest WrestleMania ever. PWI 500, number one, wrestler of the year. And you could throw in a bunch of other accolades too. The King of Kings, whatever the hell it was that he got in Saudi Arabia, beating the Crown Jewel title. But it is, to me, an absolute slam dunk. 42% of readers agree. This has got to be one of the biggest gaps, I would think, right, between number one and number two in a long time.
Yeah, I don't recall. I mean, at least since I took over, he had more than 3 times the votes. More than 3 times the percentage of the votes that the nearest runner-up got. So it's just, I mean, if you look at below him, Gunther, Will Ospreay, Bryan Danielson, like that, so murder row of wrestlers. And, his year was inarguable. I mean, just you rattle off all those achievements, and I mean, nobody else had anything close. So, and he had great matches along.
Right. That's the part that sometimes is kind of like undervalued, because I've heard, and we have different criteria, certainly not the same thing, but the Observer's got their awards. And I heard Dave Meltzer talking about, his Wrestler of the Year before I don't know if they named it yet, but when he was discussing the candidates, and he was talking about it being a real horse race between Cody and Will Ospreay. And I mean, to each his own, but to me, it's not close. I guess it depends what you value. But even if you are just valuing work rate, Cody is still very much in the mix. I mean, he had some fantastic matches this year.
Well, that's just like you said, it depends on the criteria. And that's been the Observer, he's consistent. I mean, that's been him going back to the beginning. Even, I'm not going to say that Flair and Ospreay are the same, because I think there was a point where you could argue that Flair was at or near the number one spot. But like, for example, Flair would usually beat Hogan every year for Wrestler of the Year back then. And sure, in the matches, yeah, absolutely. If you're older than 11, right? But if you're looking at the business, come on, it's not even close. Who's the Wrestler of the Year? I mean, that's different from Most Outstanding. He has the award for the guy who has the best matches.
Right.
So they had that, but
Yeah.
that's just what, that's just the way it is over there. I have to say, I'm going to ask the question because you're talking about Cody's year and how I would coin the phrase undeniable it was. But here's the question on everybody's mind. Is Teal Rhodes finally going to be happy? That's what I want to know. Is she finally going to like PWI?
No. We missed the boat. We were too late.
What more do we have
well,
to
we're
do?
not going to get credit for the fan vote, right? I mean,
no, nor should we. I mean, we do put in, the suggestions for who might be in consideration, but people vote outside of those. People don't, people will pick the sixth person in the lineup out of 10 or whatever.
I have a devil's advocate question, Kevin, about that.
Yeah.
Do you think that if we didn't have the suggestions, do you think that would have cause a significant difference in the outcome and the votes?
I think so, but I think what would happen is you would get a lot of people misunderstanding what the category is. You'd have people voting for people from the past, or you'd have people voting for someone who just doesn't really apply to the category, or maybe historically applied to the category. There's definitely an argument for that, but I think the idea is to put some of the deserving candidates in front of people that they might not necessarily think of. And then, so we can't say that we don't influence this at all, but at the end of the day, if someone wants to choose El Desperado from New Japan for Wrestler of the Year, that vote will count as much as the Cody Rhodes vote counts. We don't count it any less just because it's a write-in. So, it's an interesting point. I think this is the way it's been done for a long time. I don't see a super compelling reason to change it, but I'm open to those discussions if at some point people think that's the way to go.
Yeah. A big picture here before we go through all the awards. I mean, this was my big takeaway of kind of looking at it holistically. A great year for WWE. I mean, I think it speaks to what we've talked about, which is their business is really booming. They didn't quite clean up here, but it's pretty close. I mean, they were really dominant throughout when, and we'll go award through award, but they took the majority of the awards. And I think the flip side of that is I think it sort of solidifies the reason for concern at AEW that they did not do well at all in these awards. I think they have the one that we're about to talk to, and maybe there's another one. Two, I think, right? They've got Most Improved, and they've got Women of the Year. But to me, one of the most concerning things as far as AEW is concerned in the awards is how they did in Most Popular and Most Hated. And in Most Hated, I think they got a third runner-up spot, and I don't think they had anybody in Most Popular. That's a real problem, right? Because what that's saying is that fans are not connecting with your wrestlers one way or the other. And the other thing, and this is the one, well, I won't, we'll get to that award, but there's one that really surprised me that I would have thought would have gone to AEW and didn't. But any thoughts on that, Kevin? I mean, what the takeaway for AEW should be from how they did here?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is some confusion about who we are meant to cheer for or jeer at any given point. I mean, I think you have those roles shift a lot because the audience is maybe a bit more fickle. You could argue less well-trained than the WWE audience. Yeah. But the certainly like the booking being a little all over the place is not helping things. And I think, more than Most Hated, I think Most Popular, that's a tell if there's not a most popular wrestler who's even in contention. Which
Mark Briscoe was the only one. Well, Bryan Danielson was there, but he's not working for them essentially anymore.
No, but let's count him because he was, he worked there most of the evaluation period.
Right, but they don't have him now, right? So that's the point. He's not. He may be under contract, but he's not a guy.
Right, but if we're talking in terms of like whether the presentation influenced people to vote, even then, just Bryan Danielson is. So we have the three runners up, and then we have Roman Reigns, LA Knight, and then Bryan Danielson. So that's how far down in the pecking order AEW is for most popular of the year. That is, that's a little bit troubling.
Yeah. Let's talk about the award that they did win, or one of them, a Woman of the Year, Toni Storm.
Yep.
Was she shocked that she got this, not even remembering why she?
There's actually a video, and you can see it on our Instagram.
A rookie winning this award.
So she's given the plaque by Renee Paquette, and she's shocked because she's only had 2 matches in AEW. But then, of course, we learn that it's all over. So, regardless, we recognize the timeless Toni Storm and old school Toni Storm is the same character. So, the same person, I should say. She got a good chunk of the votes here. This was, I think, part of why, and this is not. She was also top of the women's 250. She had a fantastic year, but I think partly benefited by the fan base being split a little bit on the WWE level, because if you look at the first 2 runners up, it's Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley. So you have people on 2 opposite sides of a feud, and together they would slightly edge out Toni Storm. But really, there's no. I think it speaks to how honestly underutilized the women's division is in AEW, because you have someone who is so clearly the most popular woman in the sport for this year, and that's with someone like Rhea Ripley, who's, within WWE is more popular, but if we're talking in terms of like who was the star of a women's division, it was Toni Storm, 25%. That's very impressive. I think she deserves a lot of credit for that. I think personally, I thought her feud with Mariah May was one of the best of the year. I think it was voted a little bit low based on how it delivered, but
it was one match, right?
Sure, but you're looking at feud of the year is not necessarily about matches. It's about the rivalry. Like Punk and McIntyre, spoiler alert, the winner. Much of that wasn't the matches. The Hell in a Cell match was terrific. The match of the friendship bracelet, it sucked. It sucked.
And I said
that was very stupid. And it was
when Punk's health was unsure and it was a little unclear what was happening with that a while back, and they hadn't wrestled each other yet. I said it on here that I could have seen it winning feud of the year anyway, even without them touching each other.
That's the point. The promos were so good, and I'm not. And me, and Brian, I know you're much the same way. I'm not a long promo guy, but like the two of them back and forth, the verbal joust, incredible. So,
when you can do it, I'm for it. It's just forcing everybody to do it. That's the problem.
Yes.
The people that can do it, it's great. But
look at us talking about guys during the Woman of the Year.
I know. What is happening here? Hey, you brought it up, Kevin. Okay?
It's my fault. Absolutely.
Let me. I want to weigh in on Toni Storm, and I know I'm in the minority here. I don't want to say I don't get it, because I do get it. I'm not a fan. I've never really enjoyed the act. To me, it's so cartoonish in that it really clashes with everything else, and cartoonish in a way. I was thinking about this earlier. It's almost like and I couldn't even remember the name of the company, but then I remember Chikara. Remember Chikara, where it was like, it's sort of like everybody's in on the joke, right? That kind of thing. It's
a very indie thing when they do that sort of character.
It's very meta. It's like, I know that I know.
I used to be at like all those shows, so.
Right, and it works on that level. But to me, it's and look, I say this about everything. If it works, it works, right? And she is over. She's more over than she had ever been in with any other character. She might be the most over act in the company. So, far be it for me. But to me, it is, and part of it was, we were all there. Our experience at World's End a couple of years ago at the media scrum. It's just so put on, you still
haven't gotten over that media.
It just takes me out of it. The whole presentation so much. Some of it might be, and it's fascinating.
Wait a minute. Aren't you the big Ultimate Warrior fan? Come on, now.
In 1990. But then the point I was about to make is that it's sort of fascinating that the company that's kind of graduated out of the gimmicks is WWE. I couldn't tell you a real WWE gimmick performer
Why at 6?
Right.
Why at 6? Why?
Well,
at
that started
Yeah, and
happening.
they suck, and
Yeah.
and they're not
Oh.
over at all. They're not over at all. You know,
And they started moving away from that years ago, Attitude Era. Like I remember even talking to people that worked for the company a really, really long time through the 80s, 90s, and beyond. And they would always point to that line and say, like, yeah, we used to have guys where it was like all gimmick. Like, you know, I wouldn't say this, but some people have said to me, yeah, like they really weren't athletes back then. They were just gimmicks, and then they became athletes. So there was that. But Tony, I love Toni Storm, and it's not just because we did that amazing, wonderful collaborative cover story together, but I think she is one of the examples, and I don't think anybody would disagree with this, on the very short list of people who actually really, truly benefited from leaving WWE and going to AEW. And I think the gimmick, yeah, it's over the top and crazy, fine, but I don't think it's going to appeal to the kiddies and the mainstream kind of audience. I acknowledge that. It's very entertaining to a certain subsection of fan. I think that it's the kind of thing that WWE would never try. It's too clever for them. Most of their humor and references and things are much more broad, that's their strategy, the biggest audience possible. It's like a perfect storm for it. Well, see what I did? It's a perfect storm for AEW. It's something that would never have been tried anywhere else, or I should just say never tried in WWE. It has really worked for her. I get that it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I mean, it's one of those things. It's like you can argue that, but you can't deny the results of it's actually worked.
Well,
for her.
I don't mean to interrupt, but here's a legitimate question. And I mean this honestly. Do the metrics show that it's working?
Yes. Yeah. Some of the highest rated segments on TV, particularly around that stretch, late spring, early summer. Tony, Mariah, and then Mina Shirakawa as well. Those were the highest rated segments on AEW TV at that point. So that's why I'm saying I think underutilized. You have this almost universally liked character, at least for fans of the company. And honestly, I see a lot of people who are not like people on Twitter who will say, you know, oh, she's timeless again. I'm going to watch it. Like people who did not really watch AEW except for certain segments, and they were fans of hers because that particular presentation worked for them. So, I mean, it sold merchandise. It was, you know, working on TV. She sells like crazy for the magazine. That was our.
Really?
I'll go behind the curtain. Brian, that magazine you're talking about with your collaborative cover story, that was our best-selling issue last year.
And I told you how I saw that one in the wild in much more prominent places than I've seen typically our magazine.
That could be part of it. It's just people are like, this looks classy. Let's put it over
right. And it was a very classy cover. You know,
like I say, I'll give Laura some credit too, because it's a great looking cover.
She has a resemblance to Marilyn Monroe. There's no doubt about it. And so, like, when I saw that magazine on the main shelf next to, like, you know,
Time Life thing,
Elvis Presley, Time magazine kind of thing, right? And that sort of stuff helps. I think that it has an appeal to a certain segment of fans who don't really care about wrestling being serious or believable, who just want to be entertained by something that's not dumb and is clever. And I don't think that it's not the same audience that's going to like make major money for something like WWE, but there is a certain segment of people who will say, you know, okay, this is genuinely funny and fun and entertaining, and I can't believe they're doing this in a wrestling promotion, and will tune in for something like that. And it's worked on that level for her. I am not a fan, and it's not because I'm a prude or anything. I'm not. I believe in the purity of the gimmick and the character. I don't know why they have her veer into these kind of like weirdly vulgar, sexualized things, which work for some people, but it doesn't fit with the character that she's got. I think that's my one quibble. Yes,
she
laugh?
Just wants to do it. I don't think there's, and I think a lot of the stuff too,
I laugh when she does it, but I just feel like this doesn't fit, you know.
Totally. No, I get it. But I think also it's, from what I've seen, it's partly about the chemistry between her and Mariah and just what naturally developed there. And then Mina, when you want to add her in as well. But it's just, Yeah, I don't disagree, but I think that's why it happened. But yeah, this is, I mean, it's an impressive field. You look at her, then you have Liv and Rhea, 14 and 13%.
Liv had a great year. I mean,
yeah,
somebody who they might have been wise to go with as the Rumble winner. I think Liv would have gotten a good reaction as a Rumble winner.
Yeah, for sure. Another Rumble standout is the third runner-up, Jordynne Grace.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a very narrow margin here because right on her heels was Roxanne Perez for the third runner-up. But yeah, and I mean, of course, Jordynne now with WWE, she has WWE Superstar in her bio. Her being in the Rumble is the worst kept secret in the world.
So Tony is headlining Grand Slam. I assume she's headlining. If she's not, you talk about a mistake. I mean, and that's one of the takeaways. You just told me about how well she's doing for them metrics wise. It's still sort of unfathomable to me that we're now 6 years into the AEW and they still haven't headlined a pay-per-view with a woman. And there have been several matches over the years that I think they could have. Tony seems to be the obvious choice to do that. We're going to get her at 10 o'clock on a pre-taped show in Australia, which will have a great look because it'll be a stadium, but it almost feels like a waste of a match.
Honestly, I think if it weren't for Danielson finally winning the title at Wembley, I think you would have seen Toni Storm and Mariah possibly headline that show. Now they pumped the brakes on it a little bit heading into it. But yeah, that because that was the only match that was months in the making on the entire show. So.
Yeah. Let's go through some of the other ones. I won't take as much time on some of these. A faction of the year goes to the Bloodline. This is kind of messy to me because my thought was which Bloodline, and
it was kind of counting both because some people specified, some people didn't, and it's like, well, you can't really differentiate them because there were like Solo and Roman were in the same group for a while.
White 6, which again I think, and I'm not surprised at all. It's already kind of a dead act, God rest his soul. I think this was always a problem with Bray Wyatt too. Is at the end of the day, it's like you've got to deliver in the ring, and this kind of act, it's just hard to put in the confines of a standard wrestling match and have it work. Judgment Day cooled off a lot since their high last year. And then Blackpool Combat Club, Death Riders, not a fan. That's all I'll say.
I think they've lost a lot of the goodwill too. That's another thing to mention.
Yeah.
That and it's not because it's a heel act now, because it was a heel act at various other points. But
tag team of the year goes to the top tag team in the tag team 100, and that's Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill. Not we've talked about this. Not the strongest year for tag teams. Young Bucks. This went pretty close to, well, not exactly. I would have thought Fraction would have been a little higher. Young Bucks first runner-up, then Fraction, then Judgment Day. But there was a few years there where you think about WrestleMania headlined with a tag team championship match a couple of years ago, and from that to where we are now, and even more watered down now that Jade's out of the act and it's Bianca with Naomi's kind of a replacement. I don't know if there's a whole lot to say there. It is what it is. This is one that I was surprised at, and I agree with. Match of the year, Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes. I was sure this was going to go to
Drew and Punk.
No, I thought this was going to be a Will Ospreay award. I mean, in as much as he had so many great matches throughout the year, or a Bryan Danielson award. But again, in as much as AEW's calling card is the work rate, and they had from a work rate standpoint some fantastic matches this year. But I agree 1,000%, and I think is one of the conversations we've had, Brian, is that it is all about a context and stakes, and what move for move might have been if you're looking at it in a vacuum. If you put that exact match, Cody and Roman, in the Thunderdome, in front of no fans, it might have been but this is the Hogan Andre thing, right? I mean, move for move, maybe it was a 2.5 star match. in the context of WrestleMania 40, a packed stadium in Philadelphia, a year plus of storyline build, The Rock's involvement, The Undertaker's involvement, John Cena's involvement, all the bells and whistles. This was, to me, the pinnacle of what wrestling is, which was just an absolute blast to watch, and it elevates the actual performance of the people involved in the match.
And it was very emotionally engaging. So the level of emotion, which is an important kind of it factor that not all great matches have. Some can be technically great, but in a very kind of cold performance kind of way. But this had that emotional element to it. Very, again, very real moments, like the end of that match with, it was almost like the end of a Rocky movie, like that kind of a thing. And I think this was an example, because I personally would have voted for Punk and McIntyre and the Hell in the Cell. I just, for my own tastes of like a match I enjoy to watch. But you can look at this and say this was a great example of what one match of the year was, the match that was the most important match of the year, the most high profile, the biggest match, the one that is, in wrestling history going to be talked about the most, like a Hogan Andre. And for that reason, I could completely see it winning. And on top of that, also a very, very good match, that I don't think anyone can dispute that. So I think I could see it winning, even though I wouldn't have voted for it, but it might have been my number 2. I could definitely see it winning.
So,
it won by a lot.
Yeah,
it did. It really did. It wasn't even close. And it's funny because this, for my taste, it was really overbooked. I thought the Undertaker being in it was ridiculous. Like,
that should have been Steve Austin's
that
spot.
should have been Austin.
Right, of course. And I thought the thing with Seth doing a costume change was ridiculous. Like, it wasn't. But I'm in the minority. Like, I saw as the votes were coming in, like, oh, I guess I got this one wrong.
They've created this expectation now that the big money main events are going to have like 12,000 run-ins. Like, it's almost like what people want to see out of these matches now, which is a little weird. But
the thing is, I think so. Two things quickly. So one is in terms of Ospreay, had all these great matches, but I think that's part of what hurts him in this category. So apart from the 2 matches we just discussed, Roman and Cody, and the first runner-up, CM Punk, Drew McIntyre, Hell in a Cell, the next 1, 2, 3, 4, the next 4 runner-up spots are Bryan Danielson and or Will Ospreay. It's just there were a lot of their matches, but people couldn't decide on a definitive favorite. And I think part of it is because it didn't have so much of this rivalry component. If you look at the recent years, who has won in this category? So you have Cody Roman, Charlotte and Rhea Ripley last year, which is of course their second WrestleMania match. Cody and Seth Rollins the year before. I think that was more for Cody's debut, and that's why it's so. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that was the feud. It was the Hell in a Cell. Yeah,
that was the big bruise match. Yeah,
big brutal feud. The year before that, Britt Baker, Thunder Rosa, end of a feud, really brutal match. Year before that, Kenny Omega and Adam Page, Young Bucks. Again, another big rivalry in that tag division. And then Cody Dustin is the year before that. You have to really go back to 2018. And I mean, this is also a great rivalry. It's Okada and Kenny Omega. And it was the same in 2017. And you have these matches that are part of a series or matches that are really big spectacles in some way. So I think, the average match on a weekly TV show or a B-tier pay-per-view is going to have a much harder time winning this award. But you do occasionally see it with the Brit match or the other one was that might be it, but
yeah. That's interesting to me, Kevin, about the difference that you see. Like you said, 2017 and 2018 where Okada and Omega won.
Yep.
Now, I look at that and I wonder if how much of a turnover of the fan base there is, or the readership even. Because it's hard to, while I believe that one, those deserve it, it's hard to believe that the same people would vote for that are now voting for Cody versus Roman instead of Ospreay and Bryan Danielson.
I have a,
you know what I mean?
I have a thought of that, and I think it speaks to one of the big criticisms I have about AEW. When Okada and Omega were winning those, there was no AEW, right? So it was
right.
WWE's presentation, And that level of work rate is the shorthand, but I think we know what we mean, like a match that is sold on the athleticism and the drama, and also Tokyo Dome. Those were still kind of few and far between. I mean, that wasn't necessarily what WWE was presenting. This was still kind of around the John Cena era, and certainly Roman and Brock at the top.
2018, the first runner-up was Angle and Rousey against Triple H and Stephanie,
which is a hell of a match. That's a really fun match.
Sure, but like compared to Omega and Okada, it's a very tame kind of presentation.
Yeah, but I think what you see in the runners up here tells you everything, and that is the whole idea that it you water it down when you do it so much, and it's sort of an unusual criticism to have of Will Ospreay, but he has too many great matches, right? I mean, and the point is, when they're all 6-star matches, sort of none of them are 6-star matches, right? And when he is swinging for the fences, in front of 300 fans, and I don't mean AEW, they're doing better than 300, but they're, you heard about some of the other matches that were in the mix, not necessarily with us, but the TNA matches with Josh Alexander, these were great matches, but in front of that might have been last year, actually, right?
Yeah, no, the one at Bound for Glory, or the
was this year? He did have
a sold out at Cicero, so that was, I mean, it wasn't huge, but it was 15.
There were a lot of this, and that's kind of the thing, is that this is the problem, the kind of like the bankrupt philosophy of everything being work rate, is that when everything is the most incredible thing you've ever seen, none of it is, and it doesn't stand out. Right. And even the big Tokyo Dome main events kind of get lost in the shuffle.
I think that AEW struggles a little bit with keeping, how do I put this, making the matches seem important and memorable after they've happened.
Yes,
that's part of it.
Yeah.
Whereas, like with WWE, they definitely don't suffer from that. I mean, that's one of their biggest strengths. They beat you over the head with it forever, like all these great matches. But even with Okada and Ospreay, I think in their favor, they had, so let's say, the Wrestling Observer, right, touting the greatness of their matches from the mountaintops. So like that served the purpose of keeping those matches relevant in fans' minds, people's minds. Dave giving it, 18 stars and all that stuff. Whereas with the great AEW matches, and I think let him swing for the fences, in big matches and pay-per-view main events or pay-per-view matches in general, everybody should be swinging for the fences, and they usually do. But the thing with the AEW matches is they tend to kind of fade from memory after they've happened. Because I remember thinking, like, when we were talking about the emotion, right, of a match, there's no greater emotion than what was happening with Danielson when he was saying he was going to retire, and we were all worried that his head was going to fall off in the match with Ospreay, and it was like, it was very emotional and high stakes. But again, after it happened, it's kind of never talked about again. It kind of fades from memory, and that, I think, more than the glut of great matches, that's what's hurting the great AEW matches, is kind of like cementing their memory in fans' minds. That's the biggest problem.
That's a very good point, and that's an issue with the promoter, not the athletes. So
yes,
right.
Yeah.
Indie Wrestler of the Year goes to Mustafa Ali. I was happy to see this. I had a lot of fun interviewing him for the cover story that we ran early in the year about him. I think he had a great story, in the vein of Cody and some other guys, of leaving WWE and trying to become a bigger star outside WWE than you were able to be in it. I gotta say, a little concerned about the trajectory of it. I mean, I think he peaked early, and I don't hear a lot about Mustafa Ali. I don't bidding war for him or anything like that.
Well, yeah. So he actually did just very recently, and I don't blame you for missing it, because it was not really a huge headline with everything else going on. But he did just sign with TNA Wrestling. So, presumably making more money than he was making per appearance before, because he proved his value to them. So he'll be ineligible for the award this year because he signed. And similarly, you have Matt Cardona, who seems very keen on signing with someone now. he just, I mean, he has to have his terms met. He has to be able to do things on his terms, but he seems to be after a contract in a more way that's like where he's talking more openly about it. He was on, I think on Chris Van Vliet's podcast, he was talking about it. But you have him in the number one runner-up spot. And then it's kind of a big drop after that, which speaks to, I think, people being scooped up as opposed to staying on the indies. I mean, even Mance Warner, former GCW champion, I mean, he's with TNA now. I don't know what his contract status is there, but he's going to be, more on TV and less on independent shows. So if there's an upside to this, I think it's that, there's room now more than maybe any time in the past 10 years for indie talent to step up and really kind of make names for themselves and go for this award, among other things.
Do you think it is there an argument to be made that it's sort of not in the spirit of the indie award that a guy like Mustafa Ali or even Matt Cardona gets it, which is more, I always say, kind of like that the honky tonk man model where you leave WWE and then you go work the indies and you'll draw just on.
Well, I wouldn't compare them to the honky tonk.
No, I know, but and I don't mean it that way literally, but the point being that they come to the indies with a reputation.
It is a little bit unfair. Yeah, it's not really, but I mean, essentially the only requirement we have for this award is that someone is not contracted. So if they are working per date somewhere, they're not signed. It's the same way we wouldn't disqualify someone for working like a match on a Ring of Honor taping or extra work on Raw or something like that,
Yeah.
And I realize there are levels to that. So maybe it's something we look at in future years, but I don't know. I think it's also starts with us and making sure we're covering the top indie wrestlers. If you look at who did well in this category, you have Mance Warner in that second runner-up spot. He had a feature this year.
He's a guy who I think fits the bill. Yeah,
like people who were featured in the magazine kind of recently and prominently, which in turn, I mean, they're not getting that coverage by accident. They're getting that coverage because they're noteworthy, buzzworthy.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with this next year. I'll be interested to see who takes it or if it just kind of falls back to Matt Cardona again.
Yep. Feud of the year is another gimme, I think. CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. And they got basically double the vote of the first runner-up. I think this is an easy pick. One of the best feuds I've seen in a long time. And what was so cool about it was that it really was kind of organic in that, if you think about just in the end of 2023, when Punk comes back to WWE, he didn't really have any ready-made feuds except maybe Seth because they were kind of beefing on social media. And Drew was kind of the odd man out, not having a whole lot to do. And I mean, I think the story of this feud is really Drew McIntyre and how he interjected himself in that top spot and really created from whole cloth this storyline with Punk. And it was so entertaining. I think both did just incredible mic work. You might hate the bracelet, but the bracelet, I thought it was so wrestling at its best that they made it the symbol of something. And when he finally reclaimed it, the crowd popped. I love this feud. It was kind of the best of pro wrestling in 2024.
It was an excellent feud. I only have to say that because I did the mock barf thing at the bracelet. It wasn't at the feud overall. The Hell in a Cell match was incredible. It was gruesome.
Yeah.
In the best of ways. So
the bracelet thing that's an example of what I always say, which is I have to separate myself from my own personal taste and what is clearly obviously working because it seemed dumb to me. I'm going to be totally honest, as a fan, like that these two grown men in this serious blood feud are fighting because one guy, not only because, but one guy, you stole the bracelet with my dog and my wife's name on it. Like even to say it out loud with a
I think it
straight
worked.
face.
I think it worked in spite of what it was, and I think
Right.
it worked because of the guys involved and because the company is overall firing on all cylinders. I think if you tried that same stuff a few years ago, it would have bombed.
No, and something you couldn't do in AEW. It wouldn't work with their fan base. It would get
No.
laughed out of the building. But it worked with WWE. And when people were saying that Punk's friendship bracelet is more over than any title in the company, there was a moment where I believe that was absolutely true. Just like I think you can argue that was true about the Ulafala. And I don't know if that's necessarily such a bad thing, because when you have to remember that the whole reason they have titles is just to give guys a reason to fight each other. So if you have another reason, fine. I mean, they had the made up $1 million belt, the crowns.
I mean, I think the Olafala thing is great. Like,
yeah,
there's depth to it. There's real life symbolism to it. It didn't feel forced.
Right. Right. But it definitely worked for me more than the bracelet. But again, like, I've got to take myself out of that. It doesn't matter. Like, would I, in my own personal taste, sure, but you can't deny that people bought into that. It was not rejected. It was not thought of as silly and goofy or whatever by most people that were watching it. So,
Yeah, and beyond it, and not to dwell too much on the bracelet, but beyond it being about the bracelet, it's what they did with the bracelet. It was the visual of McIntyre dragging or on his back, bringing Punk unconscious from beating him up in the aisleway, dumping him in the aisle, and pulling the bracelet off of him. That's just great wrestling storytelling, great visuals. Let's try to move more quickly through the second half. Right now, we've gone through half of the awards. But just quickly, so the runners up: Adam Page versus Swerve Strickland. I don't get that at all. I thought that feud was horrible. Setting each other's houses on fire and injecting each other in the mouths.
Only one house on fire. Only one of them drank the other's blood.
Horrible. The worst of wrestling in 2024. Morgan and Ripley. Yeah, that was fun. I mean, I feel like that was more. I think Dominic deserves a honorable mention as part of that storyline, and Mariah May and Toni Storm only in third runner-up spot, 9%. I agree. I think that should have been higher. I think it was the best thing that AEW did.
I think there was some recency bias at work here. I think Liv Rhea was good, but it was also right before the voting happened, so it was that it picked back up. But
most hated wrestler of the year for the second year in a row goes to Dominic Mysterio. Not the deepest kind of roster of heels this year. Nobody here, I think, did. Dominic was fine. He wasn't as well early in the year. He was. I think he cooled off a little, but some of it's just his placement on the cards. Solo Sikoa in the first runner-up spot. There's different thoughts on how well Solo did. Yes, Logan in the second runner-up spot, and MJF. I think that is charity, because I don't think MJF did a good job and it's not him. I just think that character got so watered down over the years that it didn't even resemble the heel MJF that was cleaning up years ago in this award. As far as Solo, he did it almost sort of like it was what it was supposed to be. You were supposed to not like him in that spot. You were supposed to feel like it wasn't earned. But I also don't think it necessarily hit fans on that kind of visceral level that we hate this guy the way they wanted it. And I don't know what it is. The reality is he's still relatively young in wrestling. I don't know that he's like fully developed yet. And I think Tama Tonga is the star of that bloodline. He's the best thing.
Jacob Fatu, come on,
he's great. Yeah. I mean, I would have thought maybe he would have done better in
I think
rankings.
I think that it's just a case with Sikoa. I just don't think he was quite ready for that spot. And I think it was pretty obvious that he wasn't, but they had to sort of let it play out. The Dominic thing, he's done something really, really special, which I can understand. It's very hard to do nowadays. Whereas, like, if you're a heel, either they really like you, like even MJF fits in that category. Like, they kind of like you for being a jerk, and they sort of like go with it, and they'll cheer for you or they'll boo you in an ironic way. Or if they do actually hate you, it's more like, get this idiot off my television. This guy sucks. I don't want to see this. Whereas Dominic has walked that amazing line. It's like, nobody likes him. He's not the cool heel. They're not booing ironically. Like they do not like him. But it's not go away heat. It's not not like him in the sense of like, oh, this guy's awful. I think maybe in the beginning. But I think he has gotten to that amazing point where he's like that old school heel. They genuinely don't like him, but they genuinely want to see him because they want to see him get beaten and humiliated
in the weasel suit. You know,
it's very hard to do, right? And he's done it.
Yeah. I think, and I think has developed into a very good worker and a good promo. And just, I mean, you talk about commitment, the stupid hair, the stupid mustache. I mean, he got married looking like that. And you know, even see like the shoot interviews where he talks about like all he eats is chicken nuggets, you know, and they'll bring him on a tray and he'll like taste test chicken nuggets. He's just so hateable, but in a great way. I thought it wouldn't be crazy to give the guy a main event. I don't know, put the world title on him, but have him in that mix. I think they need to heat him up again to get there, but there was a period there, and they did do a Cody Dominic program briefly, but the guys, when you got that kind of heat, it's like you do have to do something with it. I think they used it probably wisely to help get Rhea over and help. I mean, I think that's it. He's sort of like,
and I mean, and Liv as a heel.
Liv, yeah,
he was the friendship bracelet in that feud.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Flip side of that, most popular wrestler of the year. We talked about it already a bit. Cody Rhodes at 28%. I think a strong pick. But you know, I wondered if you took the vote again today, if it would, you know, would be different. And Jey, even here, was
Jey had a late surge too. That's the other thing. He was getting most of the votes toward the end. Yeah. Joe Hendry at number 8. I don't know if I buy that. You know, like he's the most popular guy in TNA. What that's worth. That's where the votes went, though.
Sure. No. Yeah, I mean, I don't agree. And Rhea, I would have expected Rhea to be a lot higher.
Joe Hendry.
I think the missed time for Rhea is what this year.
Yeah. Joe Hendry got the biggest, if not close to the biggest pop of anyone in the Rumble, which blew me away because half the time, I hate to say it, maybe I'm old, maybe I don't know what's going on with the music. A lot of times I'm not even sure whose music it is.
No, the music, it's been a complaint across the board is that people are not identifiable except maybe by the catchphrase at the beginning.
Right. But what I mean is like, so what I was doing was because it's a lot, I didn't always immediately recognize people's music. When I heard the crowd reaction, I would go, okay, this is somebody big's coming out right now. Or, you know, if it was quiet, I'd be like, well, it's probably some lower mid-card person coming out right now. And when I heard, because I didn't immediately hear the music, when I heard this gigantic pop, I was very impressed because I remember going like, oh, there's a heavy hitter coming out. And I was like, okay, it's Joe Hendry. Wow. That's a big reaction for Joe Hendry, you know, at a big stadium show like this.
You know, the other one,
people singing the song, which I mean, it was hard to hear a lot of stuff like chants and things like that due to the size of the stadium and the size of the crowd and the way everyone was spaced out, but you could hear it. So
it's crazy because I mean, does TNA get 60,000 viewers on television?
People see them on NXT. There are a lot of people. TNA is doing better than it was a year ago, but the viewership has not. The people that they were hoping would go and watch TNA from NXT, I think that really hasn't happened yet. A lot of people really just are only going to watch WWE, and that's all they're going to do. There's whereas opposed to someone who watches TNA might also be watching WWE and AEW and New Japan and whatever else. But I think when he is in WWE. Which it's a matter of when.
Yeah,
huge.
The other one, not to go too off base here, Alexa Bliss, like that.
Yeah, big pop. Yeah.
I mean, people were really happy to see her back. So good for her. Inspirational wrestler of the year. This one's always kind of hard to quantify. In any given year, people take it differently, what it means. But Cody Rhodes, hard to argue that one. Finishing the story. And this is what the Rhodeses do, right? I mean, they inspire fans.
I think the first runner-up, Danielson, was a better candidate here because it's the end of his career. It's the end of his full-time career anyway. him, legitimately putting his health on the line, which granted, so is Cody, so is every other wrestler, but just, I don't know. To me, I was privately pulling for Danielson to win this, but Cody's not a bad choice either. I liked seeing in the other runner-up spots Sami Zayn and Jeff Jarrett, which again,
for sure,
different reasons, but just cool to see them get some recognition there.
Yeah, a lot of the Jarrett thing, I imagine, starts with that promo for the Owen tournament, and I think it really let fans connect with him, and he's been riding that since. Comeback of the year, I was really surprised by this one. I don't have a huge issue with Liv Morgan winning it. What shocked me here is that CM Punk is nowhere even in the runners-up, and I would have thought, well, that's because he came back in 2023. But Randy Orton's there, who came back about 5 minutes before CM Punk did, literally on the same night. So I would have thought this was the CM Punk award.
This could be a question about. So I just double checked. He's not in the short list. So maybe that's part of it. I know when it was mostly Jason McVay and I who put together the short list, and I remember discussing putting CM Punk on that, and it's like, yeah, but he was gone for about 5 minutes, and then he was in WWE. It was just he wasn't really.
Yeah,
gone.
I guess that's it. But I mean, it's always been one that's hard to define. What does it mean to come back?
I think Liv, with her being out from injury, I think also she came back from being pretty down on her luck in storyline into I'm world champion.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it.
But with Punk also had the second comeback. I mean, even discounting, he just came from AEW. Okay, maybe that watered it down. But then he got hurt and he had to have another comeback in WWE. So yeah, I could see how that would be a little weird that he's not on there, that he didn't get the vote. But I guess maybe it was that people just sort of didn't see it as a comeback for whatever reason.
This was also a very close category, single digits. For Liv Morgan. Mercedes Moné very nearly took this. Liv Morgan, again, a kind of a late surge. But and Mercedes was out for an entire year, actually out of action. And then she came back and did what she did. So,
Randy Orton at 18%. I mean, I don't want to say he disappointed, but he hasn't exactly set the world on fire. And I think that speaks to just how crowded the top of WWE is. And I think he's now more of kind of that gatekeeper role player. So, I mean, I haven't been blown away by anything he's done since he's come back. And The Rock at 14%, which is fine. I mean, biggest star in wrestling and committed himself so much leading up to WrestleMania. So that was great to see. I always think that most improved wrestler of the year is kind of like a backhanded compliment because the question is that you had so much room for improvement, but not necessarily. Mariah May wins it, and again, the part that I not that I disagree, but is she was good. She was good all along. I don't know that she had that much to improve on. It's really sort of like in some ways the most pushed award. Who got
it is that. So she was not main eventing anywhere before this,
right? And
then she was not necessarily she's not main eventing pay-per-views, but she's headlining weekly TV, and she's being a big focal point. She's a world champion. I should say. And I think also if you look at what her upside seemed to be when she went to AEW from Stardom, in Stardom, she was primarily a tag wrestler. She comes into AEW and it seems like, well, her ceiling's only going to be so high because Toni Storm, and she's probably, when her and Toni split, she's probably not going to beat Toni. Oh, lo and behold, she did. So I think it was just, but to your point, Al, she brings up in the award where Tony Schiavone, the video where Tony Schiavone gives her the award, which is also on our Instagram. She's most improved, huh? So I wasn't already the great, like thanks, I guess. You know what? No thanks.
Nia Jax in the first runner-up spot, and I think a lot of people have something to say about that. I mean, there is a case where there was a lot of room for improvement, and frankly, there still is. But yes, she's gotten better, I suppose. At 14%, Obafemi, the NXT champion, at second runner-up, and then Maxine at 9%. The big surprise for me, and I would have thought he won this. He would have won this, and he's not even, I don't see in other vote getters, Kyle Fletcher. I would have thought this was the Kyle Fletcher award. I mean, in terms of a guy who a year earlier was half of a tag team largely featured on Ring of Honor, and by the end of 2024, you know, in the semifinals of the Continental Classic, you know,
it could be that it was so late in the year, and sometimes the recency thing can work against you.
Yeah,
he was not shortlisted again, which that probably is part of it. But when we're making these shortlists, it's in the summer, you know, so it's like it's difficult.
Yeah, he's only starting to come on, because I remember when I really kind of took notice was at Grand Slam when he teamed with Will. And so it really was kind of the fall where he really started to emerge. And Rookie of the Year goes to Kalani Jordan, who did great work. Had the North American title right for a number of months. I think that the bigger story kind of coming out of Rookie of the Year, and you see it also in the runners up, is how well WWE's developmental system is working. You know, that and it's the one thing. Well, you know, they're really different models, so it's hard for AEW to replicate it. But the great thing that WWE has is that, and Kalani Jordan is an example of this, that before the idea was you would work in the indies for years and years and years before you would hope to maybe get some TV time in WWE, right? As an extra or something like that, or doing a squash match. I mean, you think about like Bryan Danielson, you know, and how Bryan Danielson was already this elite worker before he started doing jobs on Velocity, that kind of thing. And now with Kalani Jordan, and not just a Kalani Jordan, but you look at an Obafemi, who is the champion, you get to sort of begin your career on WWE television. And that's not necessarily a good thing, right? I mean, that kind of like cuts both ways. But
it's like a sink or swim thing, though.
Sure, but if you are talented, it's a heck of an opportunity to take advantage of.
Yeah, and I mean, you look and you have two of the three runners up. First runner up, Jada Parker, and second runner up, Carmen Petrovic. So it's really just and I mean, Obafemi had just been competing a little bit too long to be eligible in this category, but. You know, it says a lot about that system and what they're doing there. And I think supplementing that with the independent development system that they're doing, I think that was so far so good with that. I was a little skeptical of it, but that's
is that what Evolve is going to be? I mean, what's your understanding of what they're doing?
Yeah, Evolve is going to be, I think, more like closer to like Level Up or something like that. That's my understanding of it so far, but it could evolve. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, I know we're running long here already, but Oleg Bolton, number 3 runner-up Rookie of the Year. If you've not seen him, he is terrific. He's a New Japan prospect, graduate of their dojo system, just great powerhouse wrestler, but also mat skills, really from Kazakhstan, which is not a usual place that wrestlers hail from. Borat maybe, but not wrestlers. He's awesome. Check his stuff out. He was in the G1 Climax this year, and had 2 runs with the never open weight 6-man title. So very good.
But before we head out, I did want to talk about the Stanley Weston Awards. Kevin, you know, I know you've made it your mission to kind of catch up here, right? I mean, this used to go to one person, right. And in the last few years. Again, I think you've thought that, and rightfully so, there is a backlog of wrestlers who are deserving of it. So went to 4 people this year, Booker T, Mickie James, Gail Kim, and as we talked about before, Dave Meltzer. You know, anything you want to say about that particular group?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of people who have not received this yet, and especially people who have not received it posthumously. Some people from prior generations that have not received it, but I want to be a little more cognizant of giving people the expression, give someone their flowers while they're still around, and to appreciate it. So these are, you know, Dave Meltzer obviously still very much active. Mickie James is not officially retired, and even Booker T will come out of retirement for a match here and there. But the way I looked at this was, and you know, talked to you guys, talked to Harry Burkett, Jason McVeigh, Mike Bessler, a couple other people from the staff, just to get an idea of who was who we could look to recognize here. And in this particular case, with the exception of Dave, who's in there as a member of the media, and the first one not affiliated with our magazine directly, so congrats to him. The other three are all very active in cultivating the next generation of talent. You have Mickey James working behind the scenes in multiple places, Booker T with his Reality of Wrestling school, and then the promotion that goes with that. Both of them are going to be working on the WWE Legends of Future Greats show, which is coming up. And then you have Gail Kim, of course, who's a big wheel behind the scenes at TNA Wrestling. And just all four of them fantastic workers, and I think deserved their due. So.
Yeah. Excellent. Great issue. As always, lots more in here. The usual recap of the year, lots of photos, the unofficial, official awards, the top 10 stories of the year that Harry and I put together, title histories for all the major promotions, all the title changes throughout the year, staff memories. So tons of stuff. Such a fun issue, and again, the kind of one that you'll go back to. I love pulling up, like an '89 Achievement Awards issue.
That's my
and it's sort of like
I got an unofficial official award published in like 1992 or 3.
Really?
I don't even remember what it was. I have to look it up.
I think I might have also. I don't remember what it is. Now I'm going to have to look for mine. But yeah, I used to crack up at these, as a kid. I thought they were the funniest thing in the world. So
really
great issue.
There are some that I couldn't print that were still very funny. But
Kevin, how is stuff coming to you or to the magazine for this? I mean, are you getting ballots in the mail, or are you
still get a surprising amount of ballots here in the mail? In fact, some of them just did not make the cutoff. We got them. They poured in like a week later, and it was
cutting out the page.
Yeah. People cut out the page. Some people photocopy the page. Some people write on loose leaf. I think it has shifted where it's mostly email submissions, but a lot of people still send in their ballot. They like the ritual of it, I guess.
Yeah. Anyway, go over to pwi-online.com. Get the magazine while you're there. Subscribe. We're starting a whole new year with new projects. I just wrapped up a really interesting interview for the next issue. And before you know it, are we doing Supercards this year?
Yeah. I mean, we can preview a little bit. We have Spotlight on Japan coming next.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Supercards coming 2 issues after that. And then, of course, we'll have our usual list issues later in the year, the bane of my existence.
Yep. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I feel like we're done. It starts over again. So yeah, I mean, this is, I don't want to call it downtime, but this is the closest thing to, after the 3 rankings and the awards, it's like
this is the most feature heavy part. I have the most fun with this stretch. So
yeah. Anyway, so we've been out here for a while. Just quickly, Brian, you want to plug the book or anything else you've got going on before we skip out of here?
Sure, a couple things. If it's okay to mention other podcasts on here besides my own, I was just a guest on the Stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw podcast.
Oh wow, cool!
Which was so much fun. I interviewed Jerry Briscoe for the Gorilla Monsoon book, so we were kind of going. I was trying to get him on my podcast, but I wound up going on theirs, which I think is even better. And it was fun. We got to talk about the Sheik and Gorilla Monsoon and all that. It's a fun conversation. The other thing I want to say about the book, because I update people about my book, Irresistible Force: The Life and Times of Gorilla Monsoon, which I'll finally be able to shut up about when it comes out in the fall, though I probably won't then either. But if you want to talk about the new WWE and the new philosophy and everything, they are providing photography for this book.
Wow.
Even including the cover shot.
No, really?
Even though it's not their book, and no, they are not exercising any editorial control whatsoever. If they didn't like the book, they simply would not have provided photos, and that would have been fine. We would have lived. But they are providing like 11 pictures, which is probably like a third or almost a quarter of all the pictures in the book. And again, it was actually a very easy process through ECW Press. Frank Fatucci, who I know really well over there, he pulled photos, and
Frank very helpful with the plaques, and he's instrumental in that process.
He's amazing. And it was important to me because that period of Gorilla's career that he's most known for today was when he was the WWF announcer and president. So they kind of have control over a lot of those pictures.
Yep.
You know, we're getting a few from George Napolitano, but I mean, the type of pictures that WWE would have, like they're the only one that are going to have a posed shot on the Primetime Wrestling studio set with Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan, and we have that. So I'm super excited about that, to have them on board and actually helping with the book. Without any, there don't seem to be any conditions. I'm going to cross my fingers, but it's been great. Yeah.
I saw something that I wanted to ask you. They revealed the topics for this year's Dark Side of the Ring, and I saw the Sheik up there. Anything you can tell us about that? Are you involved at all?
I was involved as a consultant, because a lot of people have asked me this. So I want to make it clear, because I know when it comes out, I know I'm going to I don't have a self-inflated self-importance, but I know people are going to be like, how come you weren't on this? You needed to be on this. I want to be clear. And they said this to me, and I do believe this is a fact. They very rarely, if ever, have any historians interviewed on camera for this show. Mm-hmm. Some other wrestling documentaries, yes. Dark Side of the Ring, what they tend to do is eyewitnesses. They want people who were there. It's much more in like that tabloid style. They want people that were directly there. I know the one exception, big one they make, is Dave Meltzer, but he's Dave Meltzer. And he was covering a lot of these scandals in real time in the Observer. Sure. I get it. So, I mean, that's kind of where we were at. They don't, it's not the style of the show to have these kind of like learned historians picking things apart. I was a consultant. They had extended interviews with me on what should be covered, and the book is definitely being used as a reference. I helped to make the connection with the Farhat family and them, so that knowing that they could be somebody that they could trust and that sort of thing. And because I'm very good friends now, thankfully, with Susie Farhat Sandin, who is the Sheik's granddaughter, and his daughter-in-law, Carrie Farhat, who is married to Sheik's son, Tommy Farhat. And so I have that goodwill that I built up with the family to a certain extent, at least I like to think so, that I was able to kind of bridge the gap between the show and the family. So behind the scenes, yes. Am I going to be on camera? No.
Are you confident they're going to do a respectable job of the subject matter?
I think so. I mean, if they're using the book as a jumping off point for a lot of things, and I know they've got the family, they've also got Dave Brzezinski, who was Sheik's manager and like somebody deeply involved in the front office. They've got Mickey Doyle, who wrestled for the Sheik, and people like that. You know, there aren't a lot of people. This is a long time ago, so there aren't a lot of people around anymore who are like in that inner circle. But I think they have the right people they're putting on camera. So I'm sure.
Is Sabu involved? Do you know?
Yes, yes. Sabu is going to be on there. So I mean, I think they're going to do a great job with it.
Great, excellent. Forward to it. All right, guys, thank you so much. Again, head on over to PWI-online.com, pick up the year-end issue, and subscribe while you're there, and we will see you all soon.